Hello, good afternoon. My name is Roberto Casuriaga, and I'm Microsoft Director for Latin America, and I'm with Wilton Pais, that you probably know from Microsoft Chile. Today we are going to make a quick presentation, and we are going to show you a lot of content in these 30 minutes, discussing something that maybe has not been mentioned a lot during this conference, but is very important. You have been listening to technical presentations or presentations about the vision, but we are going to talk about the ethical aspect of what's coming. It's important for those of you here and those who are watching us online because it's a critical aspect of our work for those of us who represent technological companies or are related in some way to the world of technology. The technology of the future obliges us to have an outlook that goes beyond technology. And of course, I don't need to define artificial intelligence, so we are going to assume that most of you know about artificial intelligence. But from a technical point of view, I'll tell you, as many have said, in three of these four things you can see here: the interpretation of language, the translation, object recognition. Technically, we are in what is called human piety, or that is to say, recognition as human beings too. And I repeat, from a technical point of view, because it does not mean that the knowledge is the same. You have seen it in many presentations. We are not even close to where we could be. The limit is set very high, but from a technical point of view, I would say that at the moment, computers can see and recognize and translate at the same level as human beings. What is behind this is also something you know well. What makes it possible for us to have made such big progress? Here you see a letter from 1955 when the term artificial intelligence was used for the first time. But it's during the last 4 or 5 years that we have started talking a lot about artificial intelligence because we have the capability of managing great volumes of data, mostly in the cloud, and we have made progress in algorithms and deep learning, which is the work that some of your companies do. So we have achieved human parity in several things, and the trend is accelerating for several reasons that you see on the screen. Now, what does this mean from an economic point of view? It's a rebirth of the economy based on technology. We saw it earlier today. GenXus attracts people from all over the world. I asked Nicolas, so many people come from Asia for these events, and well, we said that it's because here there is a platform that manages to do so many things. So this is something that is being done from Uruguay, but imagine what is being done in other parts of the world. We are in a very intense economy, an economy based on technology that is growing a gigantic rhythm. These figures are in $1 million, and you see how much the figures are increasing. So human parity in technical aspect, the technical basis to achieve this parity, and on the other hand, the economic impact these changes have. The consequence is that there are many questions that arise, and you may check the World Economic Forum and see what are the questions that society is asking around these changes and what these changes entail. Questions about privacy, questions about errors that the machine may make, or racial recognition, or biases, security. the rights of human beings compared to the rights of machines, and both combined, the non-intentional consequences, and lastly, job loss. I think that this is one of the aspects that is widely discussed, especially in this country, the loss of jobs due to the growth of artificial intelligence. All these matters are being questioned at the moment due to the acceleration that is taking place throughout the world. So one of the conclusions is that there is a lot of anxiety, growing anxiety, and maybe those who are here and are watching us online have less anxiety because you are the ones who are producing the change. But think of the anxiety about privacy for other people and the anxiety of parents concerning the kind of job that their children will have in the future. And they don't know whether the profession they are about to choose will exist in the future or not. If the computers behave more like human beings, how would they impact real people? Wilson, I give you the floor. Thank you, Roberto. Yes, in fact, this anxiety that we are all living, especially the ones who are on the other side of the counter, who are not the creators of the technology, well, this anxiety is understood better by us. And I understand it better because I studied maths, so I can talk about artificial intelligence. And there is a meme that you may have seen several questions if around a machine that is being uncovered. Nicolas Godal came and started programming in Prolog, and this means programming for artificial intelligence in a very serious manner. Now, based on our experience, concerns are different in different countries. European countries and Nordic countries are very much concerned about the privacy of data. And in Latin America, the main concern, however, is job losses. How will this affect my job? And maybe that's not the case in Uruguay, but in Chile, it's something that concerns the Ministry of Labor, the parties, opposition. Well, I already talking about it. We cannot predict the future, but we know that other technologies have had a very significant impact. For example, the automobiles vis-a-vis the transportation with horses. This is a square in Montevideo, the square Matriz, and the photo is from 1910 or 1915. Depending on the countries, this is what you would see at the time, transport that used horse traction. To give you an idea, at this time, 25% of agricultural production had the purpose of feeding horses. The US were always a big agricultural power and produce horse fodder. This is another picture in Montevideo 20 years later, and the automobiles are everywhere. Now, we know that the horse was out of a job and became a member of the jet set. It is no longer pulling carts. Now it's playing polo or going for trips with tourists, and is in competitions. But definitely the horse lost its main job, luckily for the horse. Human economy was based to a great extent on horses that have been with us for thousands of years. Now, There were direct impacts of this transformation. And I like these slides that show that many of the jobs associated to transport with horse and carriages changed. Imagine the people who had to take care of the horses. Well, they had to change their jobs. The veterinarians, for example, and if 25% of agriculture in the US was dedicated to horses, well, the population of horses has probably diminished. In Uruguay, you know that there are 3 million inhabitants. Some of us have left the country, but we are still in touch, and there are about 2 million cows. In Chile, there are 18 million people and there are 4 million cows. Just to set the context, in Uruguay, we learn that it's okay that there are 4 cows per person. But do you know that the population of cows is artificially large because it has been invented by the human beings? And of course, this contributes to climate change because the gases that are emitted by cows affect the atmosphere. So we feed with these animals, but we are causing at the same time a part of the climate change, and it is something that we produce, that we cause because we eat a lot of beef. So these are changes that have an impact on the number of jobs in certain categories, but at the same time create other jobs. These are the direct changes, but there are also indirect changes. Consumer credit, for example, in the US is accelerated on the basis of the objects that families wanted to buy when they didn't have enough resources. So they were buying things that were too expensive and they were buying them in installments. Also, the homes, the real estate was expensive, but there was already an industry associated to mortgage credits. There was a boom in the financial industry in the US as a consequence of all this. Another thing that developed in the US was the branding, the advertising, something that Nicolas likes. Now it was necessary to capture the imagination of the people and convey a message to those who were driving along a road at 40 or 50 miles per hour. And that's where the M of McDonald appears and logos develop. So there are direct and indirect impacts. But how will the work change in the future? As I said, we cannot guess what's going to happen. But we know that artificial intelligence is going to replace some jobs, especially those that require an analysis from by people. It's going to have an impact on translators, on interpreters too. Sorry, interpreters, pay attention. Those who are interpreting are probably saying something else. And all these jobs are going to be impacted by artificial intelligence. Some of these jobs are not going to suffer any impact. I was a few weeks ago talking to a scientist in Stanford in a lab that is replicating a hand. But according to the scientists, there have been advances in robotics and artificial intelligence, but we are decades away from having something that can do what I'm doing, touching Roberto without making him feel bad and making him feel affection. The therapists, the social workers, teachers, nurses, any job that requires a high level of human connection and empathy is not easy to replace. And obviously, there are many people who are not working at the moment and who will join the labor force thanks to these technologies. For example, people who have limited vision or are blind, people who have psycho-emotional skills that are different from the rest. We know that there are many groups in the world that can join the labor force and can now be communicated to the rest of the world thanks to these new technologies. There's a lot of progress with regard to vision and the understanding of human language. On the other hand, many jobs will be created in the future. These are just some examples. Who is going to train these algorithms? Which, what will be the architect of the next generation? Who is going to train the machines for facial recognition? Well, there will have to be specialists, and I think that they're going to be mini Wilsons. It will be a dangerous world, and there will be algorithms programmed by me, algorithms that are trained with my data and my skills. And I will be able to put these algorithms to work for me. I think that the intellectual property of algorithms will be mine, and if someone needs them, these algorithms can be sent to other places in the world and will work for me. Maybe I will be in Punta del Este or at home. And there is an issue here of intellectual property. And if the algorithms produce an error legally, I'm going to be the responsible party. The accountability will be mine because the algorithms will be developed by me. So there is a new world of new professions opening out there. Now, this requires progress in various disciplines. The computer science, of course, the data science, a discipline that is becoming independent. And in Chile, for example, we have started interacting with big banks like the Tata officer. And yesterday, I had a talk with Pablo Garcia, who is data officer of a large bank in Chile. And it's not these people in the IT department of the bank. He is a data scientist in another division. And now we come to the ethics. The companies that create technology, how are they going to develop it? What can technology do and what is it that it can't? Okay, let's come back to ethics. We know that there could be a game changer when we talk about artificial intelligence. And I'll start by the end. We need to avoid that the fact that we get in a vicious circle, the vicious circle that would take us to a race that sinks us all. That's what we have to avoid as part of the society working in this world. We have to get into a virtuous circle. And as Wilson said, we have to work on regulations around this new world. There cannot be full freedom without regulations because we come from a world in which there are certain regulations in order to operate in a balanced and correct world. And the next world, the world of the future, also needs to operate with balance. Why now? Well, because the discussion is this one. In the last 2 or 3 years, the discussion has turned around technological progress towards artificial intelligence, but now we already see the production of these technological advances, and we have to talk about ethics and regulations around this data-driven business, as this Forbes article says. In our case, in particular, Microsoft, we decided that we would be working on the basis of 6 ethical principles concerning artificial intelligence, and this is in a book that we published a couple of years ago titled The Future Computing. So these principles speak by themselves, but I'm going to enter into details on 1 or 2 of them. Why? Because we think that many of the people who work with technology, who are here present or who are following us online are working on these aspects and should have an understanding on how we produce the technology. So the first principle is fairness, justice in this sense that everything that is programmed is fair and is not oriented to a certain group of the population, and it should also be inclusive. Our programming of artificial intelligence should not be discriminatory. That's the first principle. Whatever we do should pursue the concept of fairness. The word in English, I think, is better than its equivalent in Spanish. And then reliability and safety. This is extremely important, and I'll give you an example. Let me describe what's going on here. This is a beta version of the software of a Tesla, and the car is under production. The person is on the road in a Tesla, and in an it gets stuck in an autonomous mode. So in this case, it's a beta test on production. For those who are in the old technology, this is what's happening now. The this is a example of what happens in reality. Think of all the things we are testing. Our programming has to be made in such a way that the basic principle is the reliability and the safety of the technology we are using. There are so many possibilities in technology, but when we include the principles of reliability and safety, we end up doing less than what we envisioned at the beginning. And that's the right thing to do, because this autonomous car could have many more functionalities, but they may not fulfill the requirements of these two principles, reliability and safety. Privacy and security. Privacy is very much discussed. And I have an example from 2012, before artificial intelligence reached the point at which it is today. In this example, we see that Target's team had people who were expert in statistics, who started investigating consuming patterns of the people who went to Target. And he decided that based on 4 or 5 articles, he could determine that a certain woman was pregnant, and then this woman would receive a catalog in the mail with certain articles. What happened? The person in question was a teenager, and the father started receiving catalogs of baby clothes, and the message said, "Madam, given that you are pregnant, here are some options so that you continue being a customer of Target when the baby is born." So imagine the father, who was furious and went to Target, and this question reached the very high levels of management in Target. And there was technology involved, data analysis. There wasn't artificial intelligence, but it was a question of privacy. Could we do this? Now, the father learned through Target that his daughter was pregnant, so he learned through Target that he was going to be a grandfather. This is an extreme example, but it's from 2012. Last point, inclusion or inclusiveness. Wilson spoke about people who are not included and could be. There has been a lot of noise about the fact that some recognition softwares are more accurate for white middle-aged men than for people who were not white and middle-aged. So there is a question of bias here. The algorithm was programmed with more statistics of concerning white men than other races, women, etc. So we are programming an algorithm that it's learning by itself, and it has to be done with inclusiveness. Yes, and many companies such as IBM, Google, Microsoft had to throw away all the data they had for faces and start from scratch again, because these ethical principles of development of the technology were declared, and now we are inviting you all to have ethical principles of what you should do and what you should not do. What to do if you find an error, a failure in the way in which we are creating this technology. Transparency, for example, in the US, or rather in Europe, there are regulations that set that a client will be able to ask, what is the algorithm that left me out of this mortgage credit, or this decision of being a client of the bank, or having a health care? They have to reply and they have to explain why I was left aside, and the institution has to review whether the decision is correct. So this is a principle of transparency. Accountability. Who an algorithm has bumped against me on the road. So who is accountable for this? In the US, someone driving under the influence was stopped. The police asked for the documents and found out that he had consumed alcohol, and the guy said, "I'm not driving." He was in a Tesla, and he said that he was on autopilot. So there are many loopholes here. The guy was not driving, but he is the driver in charge. So what happens if the computer fails? He wouldn't have been able to take control of the car because he had drunk alcohol. So there are many different cases that may occur, and it's important to define accountability. If a robot kills someone, who is to blame? The programmer or the owner? A programmer may say, I programmed the robot based on such and such platform. I don't have visibility of the algorithms that underlie the code that I developed. So these are the implications for the industry. So to sum up, some considerations. There are some groups of governments and companies and group of companies such as Microsoft that are working on self-regulation coming from the private sector, and they are moving in the right direction. There is a feeling that we have to develop this amongst all of us, and we cannot leave it in the hands of the governments or the politicians, because they don't have the information or the technical capabilities to understand what's going on. It cannot be left in the hands of the creators of these technologies either. We are making a concrete call to make people realize that this is in the hands of Uruguay too and all countries, and it's not Microsoft or IBM. No, it's all the companies in the industry that have to give their opinion. For example, the group of countries that is directed by Macron, which is called Call for Trust, and it's composed by many countries, is committed to protecting consumers and individuals with new legislation, as well as Tech Accord, which is a private organization of which Microsoft is a member, to make sure that digital economy is actually digital economy that is healthy and that grows well in the future. That is why we need this threshold of protection for everyone, not only for the consumers and clients, but also for us. Finally, I would like to invite all of you to train in this matter. Microsoft offers technical training on artificial intelligence, but also on business topics. I know that there are lawyers here that I was talking to during the break, and it's necessary to get training. It's necessary to study. We have the AI Business School. There are many modules. All of them, or most of them, are translated into Spanish, and we are all invited to learn on these topics in order to be able to participate in the construction of this technology in the future. Now, Roberto will tell you an anecdote. Who is Casper Klynge? Maybe he will be the star guest next year. That's a challenge for Nicolas. This is a very important person because he was the first one in something. I was in Seattle not long ago, and I met with a delegation from Denmark. I didn't meet Casper Klynge, who was going to meet with Microsoft's vice presidents, but the delegation of Denmark told us we are coming here with a minister. He's the first ambassador of our country for the tech industry. He's not the ambassador of Denmark in the US or in China. He's the ambassador before the tech industry. What is his role? I'll go back to the third slide. The role is the following. In Denmark, like in other countries, they are thinking of these regulations. They know that they have to work with the technology industry on these regulations, but they know that this technology is everywhere in the world. In Uruguay, Montevideo, we have thousands of people, and what they do has an impact in Japan, in China, in Europe, in the Americas, and this happens from Uruguay. So if you are going to relate with the companies that are designing the future from a technological point of view, you need a relationship in order to approve the regulations to protect the citizens and their privacy. That is why Denmark has appointed this ambassador who is always in touch with technological ecosystems, those that are inside Denmark, which are a minority, and all those that will have an impact in Denmark, Google, Microsoft, Genexus, and all those that can have an impact on Denmark. In this case, the political world and the world of governments will have the regulations they need in order to protect their people. We have usually technologists in these presentations, and with a sentence by Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, but we decided to put the picture of a politician because he's the one that is bringing together different worlds, the world of regulations and the world of the private industry that is creating the technology and that is concerned about managing this technology on the basis of very strict principles. So this is food for thought about the world of the future based on ethical principles for the administration of this technology.